Thank you all for coming. Tonight's Beetcoin Dialogue, we're featuring Linda Illsley of Slow Money Four Corners, which is in Durango, and Linley Dixon, who is a recipient of a 0% loan from the group. And Linley is also a very active social entrepreneur, rabble rouser, organizer with the Real Organic Project. And so we're going to hear some from her after she gives us a tour of her farm and talks about her farm in Durango. She'll talk a little bit about Real Organic Project, which is a very important sister NGO. So Linda, you want to share a few minutes about just to kind of give the framework of Slow Money Four Corners for everybody?
Hi, so I am just finishing up on something I was doing earlier. So Four Corners Slow Money, our very first vote when we were forming it is that we wanted to be inclusive, which I'm still very, very proud of. We encompass 4 regions in the south, I call it the belly button, the southwesternmost part of Colorado. And we have been around as an all volunteer organization that decided to offer 0% loans to local farmers or food entrepreneurs. So we have a steering committee that kind of reviews all the loans, and then we put it to the membership to choose who's going to get the loan. And it's peer-to-peer lending that is based on contributions by the members. It was super fun with Linley, who I've known for many years. They were the very first farm to actually apply for a loan, which they paid back super fast. And then in the process of them constructing their greenhouse, they applied for a second loan. And it was a joy that they did, because what they've done with that second loan has been pretty incredible. So up to date, we have distributed slightly over $60,000 in 0% loans, primarily to farmers, although we have had 2 food entrepreneurs that have also applied and received loans. And we wouldn't have really gotten started had it not been for Woody and Slow Money National giving us a matching grants fund of $5,000 that we were able to match in it pretty fast. Actually, we were surprised. So why did we get started was a realization by a lot of us that local farming really needed support, because of stories like a farmer that quit because the wheelbarrow broke at the beginning of the season, and they didn't have the funds because they had spent all their money on seed to replace the wheelbarrow, and that just took them over the edge and they quit. And it's like, we really need to do something for the farmers that cannot get conventional loans. So a group of us got together. Initially, it was controversial that it would be a 0% loan, because there was people that wanted to make money, and they were kind of saying, that is never going to work, it's never going to fly. Luckily, we proved them wrong. We're still around, we're still growing imperfectly, as many of these volunteer organizations, because we're all super busy. We have one member that's having a baby at the end of the month, another one that's getting married next month. So right now we're kind of, still moving, still doing things, but taking into account what everybody needs to do for themselves. I have high hopes, and I'm sure Linley can tell you a little bit more in a much more eloquent way what it has meant for them to receive these loans.
Shall I jump in?
Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry. Thanks, Linda. Linda's very understated about how hard she works and how creative her input is. So thank you, Linda, for all your hard work. Linley, take it away.
Where to begin? I think with Linda might be a good start. So our farm story starts where we don't have land. We were the landless farmers in town. And if you've ever seen, oh, Linda, help me remember the motorcyclist that came through, he did a little like mini documentaries on our farm, on all the areas, Revolutionary or something like that.
Responsible Revolution.
There you go. Those are really Responsible Revolution. Check that out, because he does videos all over the world about people making a difference. It's very Slow Money-esque. But we were the kind of the notorious landless farmers in town. And we started on a family friend's front yard. There was no water rights. And if you live out west and you're growing vegetables, you kind of know that's a big deal. So we just had about a third of an acre, and we'd get these city water bills that were like more than the vegetables we were selling. And we had 15 CSA members, and we kind of doubled every year from there. But in our second year, a CSA member said, I've got an acre in front of my house with water. And so it grew from there. But at the end of that season, so we had an acre kind of right next door to the family plot that we had started on. And that the first year, we had never had a ripened tomato. We got planted in kind of mid-June, because we were putting up our tunnels that year. And that's really, our last frost date is mid-June, if you don't have protection. And then in our tunnels, the frost came like the third week of September, which it always does. And our tomatoes were just ripening. So then the next year we were out in the open, but we had a greenhouse, we were more on top of it. We got planted, we were able to cover the tomatoes through some of the cold, late May and early June. And we had ripe tomatoes in August. And just when we were at peak harvest, a hailstorm went through and just totally wiped out a half an acre of tomatoes, which, we were going to sell to a local Mexican restaurant, to Linda's restaurant. And she said, I've got freezer space. And so before they rotted that evening, we sent out kind of an email that went viral. And we had in this tiny little neighborhood, so the poor neighbors, all of a sudden there was all this traffic coming into this house in this neighborhood. But we saved all the tomatoes that were hailed. Linda made green tomato chutney out of it. And, I'm sure there was a ripe tomato salsa too. We separated them based on ripeness and froze them. And she paid me for them. I mean, it was just an unbelievable gesture, both from Linda and the community, about, what can happen when a community comes together in terms of saving food. These were like hail damaged tomatoes that we figured out how to save. So then the next few years, we rented another plot in town, and our CSA grew to over 150 members. And we had this wonderful on-farm pickup where we were kind of harvesting, and the farm crew was able to just kind of plop stuff on tables unwashed. And the community got so much food because we didn't have to do any refrigeration, or we didn't have any infrastructure. We didn't have a wash station, but it was this great way to just kind of get started farming a lot of food. People could get a lot of, access to the farm. They had, if they wanted more, I was like, oh, the kale's out this way, go pick whatever you want. And then the rent just kept going up on that piece of property, and it also went for sale. So my husband and I were quitting. We were like, we can't afford land in Durango with water. So we're done. We want to live here. This is where my parents are. This is where my daughter had a community. And I got a knock on the door that, within a few months of that decision, from someone who wanted farmers to be on their land. And at first, he wanted someone to rent the land. So we said, no, thanks. We're never going to go down that situation where we're renting land. We need to put up infrastructure in these short seasons to grow vegetables. And, it's scary to us to put in infrastructure on land that we don't own. So we shut the door. And then a couple of weeks later, the same guy came back and said, okay, let's talk. Let's see if we can work this out. And there was a lot of negotiation, but eventually we did end up kind of renting to own. And in the meantime, applying for an FSA loan. So that's a farm service agency loan with low interest. And we're now on 6 acres with really good water. Even in our driest years, our ditch has run from April to August. And we actually grow year round because we've got a really great water table. And we don't use a lot of water in our greenhouse space, but it can be really productive. So this is the structure that I'm in now that we got our slow money loan for. Well, the first loan was, I'll show you, it was for this massive solar array to actually run this thing first. And I don't know if everybody can see, but up there on our garage, that blue structure, there's all solar panels on the roof. And so the first slow money loan, I think we only had $3,000 in the account, and we bought one of those solar panels with the loans. And actually, the way I remember the story, Linda, is when it came time to repay that $3,000, I was almost in tears. And I said, well, technically it's in the bank, but this greenhouse project is twice as expensive and taking twice as long as we thought. So we're not able to, like, you know, get yields to kind of pay it back. I said, we're in trouble. And she said, well, you're just in time, pay back your loan and apply again. So we applied, paid it back, and then applied again for a second slow money loan for $10,000 or just under. And this is the structure we built. We actually, it's so funny to think that we couldn't figure out how to get a ripe tomato in our first growing season. This is our 13th growing season. And I don't know if you can see all the ripe tomatoes down the row, but we have been harvesting for a couple weeks now. And the reason why is because of this pipe rail system. So this carries hot water that's heated from the solar panels. We do have a backup boiler up there, or heater, which we haven't had to use because we grow salad greens and carrots in here in the winter. So we bring the temperature way down, but there is kind of a backup system if the solar fails us. And then we have a pad and fan, which on one end of the greenhouse, this is what blew in with our 50-mile-per-hour winds, is this whole wall on the south end is evaporative cooling. So we can maintain the appropriate humidity and temperature in here, which is about 70 degrees and 70% humidity. If you're a tomato, that's what you love. And we have 3 other tunnels out here that are just passive. You know, I don't know if you can see those. You roll the sides down when it's getting too hot, and then the humidity drops to about 20%. And the stomates in the plants just close, and they say, we're not going to photosynthesize right now. So these plants are actually the same age and they're ripe as the ones in there in kind of the more passive greenhouse, and those in the passive greenhouse are not ripe yet. So it's really made a big difference in terms of productivity. The other thing that we're really proud about in here is that we our native soil is very highly mineralized, really good organic matter to start with. So we're pretty lucky, but we work with table to plate. So it's kind of table to farm compost company. It's kind of backwards. You think of farm to table, but this is table to farm. And so people around the community around Durango are composting all their kitchen scraps, and they make this beautiful, all kind of locally available vegetarian compost that we use for 100% of the fertility for these tomatoes. And these tomatoes are heavy feeders. They are producing, we get about 800 pints of cherry tomatoes a week out of this greenhouse. So they are feeding really heavily from the soil. And about every 3 weeks, we just sprinkle right on top of the drip tape down here, this gorgeous compost. And the roots are kind of, you can see I got some of the roots here. They're kind of shallow. So they're really feeding right off of the compost that's right on the surface here. So, whoops, low battery. Hopefully you can still see me. I'm gonna plug myself in. We have a long story of, kind of failures every season. Talking about the winds kind of blowing our south cooling wall in, but we also have a foliar disease this year that we've never seen before. And so that had to do with kind of overnight humidity levels getting too high. And so I could kind of bring in the Real Organic Project with this story, because that is how we were able to get a loan on our farm. As I work off the farm. My husband and brother run the farm full time, but I'm pretty much full time off the farm. And the Real Organic Project is a collaboration of organic farmers that came together to protect the integrity of the organic program. But it's also this incredible farmer to farmer connection. So I learned how to grow these greenhouse tomatoes and the type of structure to put up from Dave Chapman, who's one of the best organic tomato growers in the world, really. And, you know, has 40 years of experience doing this, and helped me kind of apply what he's learned on 2 acres into this kind of 3,000 square foot greenhouse. And so it's these farmer to farmer connections that I think we really need to keep the organic movement growing. I don't know how much you follow food politics, but the Biden administration just announced $1 billion for climate smart agriculture. And the word organic wasn't mentioned once in that. And it's really going, we'll see, but I mean, these are $100 million grants, but the word on the street is that who's getting these grants are no-till with herbicide. And that, you know, some of these organic practices like cover cropping, where you're actually incorporating a lot of biomass into the soil, and that is how you grow your own fertility. So you have no need for fertilizers, and that, you know, the cover crops are suppressing the weeds, so you have no need for herbicides. These organic practices are being picked up by mainstream conventional chemical ag, is what I call it. And that's a good thing. But a lot of the organic farmers that have been doing these practices for years are not being fostered in the system at all, and their markets are being you know, closed, so they're not getting shelf space. And I think it's really important to tell these stories, to talk about what is going on on the individual farm basis. So that's what we try to do with the Real Organic Project. We write weekly Sunday letters that you should read. We got one this week from a farmer in Montana. I see Becky Weeds on the call, saying, why are you always you're depressing me about all these depressing issues, and let's tell some good stories. So we try to tell the good stories, and we're going to this weekend. We're going to tell this farmer's story. But I think it's important to get out what's really happening to farmers and some of the hardships that we're facing, because I think eaters and consumers, like, we want to do the right thing. And sometimes we get fooled by the greenwashing, or we just don't know how to find the right product. And it's not easy when you're going out to eat or traveling to buy all local. And I think if we're really honest with each other, a lot of us, you know, is, even as a farmer, as hard as I try to buy locally, a lot of our food comes from organic, but it's this mainstream grocery store organic. And so I think we should be talking about how to get our kind of small local organic farmers some of that grocery store shelf space so that we can grow. Someone asked me if we were going to put up another tunnel, and I said, I don't think we have the markets for it in this town, which is crazy. You know, it's a 30,000 person town. And, you know, if you expand that bubble out a little bit more, there's 100,000 people in this Four Corners area. So we should be able to put up another tunnel, but the markets aren't there. And so I think we need to get vocal about it and active. And that's, you know, kind of telling these stories is what the Real Organic Project is all about. So check us out. And that's how I'm growing such amazing tomatoes right now. I'll open it up to questions. Of course, we have, you know, 5 other acres that we have production on that I could talk about as well. But this is the structure that we got our slow money loan.
Linley, this is me, Woody. So yeah, say a little bit more about the whole farm operation. I think people, you know, kind of want to see the whole thing, not just the structure. And then I
can show you, yeah.
I'm glad you touched on the marketing thing. I think it'd be interesting just to, after you talk a little bit more about the farm, just talk a little bit more about the market in Durango, the local food movement, kind of where it is, and just a little more about the market side of it.
We do a lot of salad greens on the rest of the farm, and we sow consecutively every week in these paper pots. So this is a way that we farm without tractors. Actually, this is just kind of a pull behind, and you can get 300 heads of lettuce in this tiny one tray. And then when you go to plant it, you just pull this little thing. There's great videos online, and it separates them 6 inches apart. And so this is a way we can get 300 heads of lettuce, which we used to break our backs, you know, planting each one individually. We can get it planted standing up in about 5 minutes. So that was a huge, once we figured that out, we successfully plant greens, you know, kale, chard, baby greens like that, and lettuce. Gosh, we do so much in those paper pots. Cilantro, we do some root crops, but not a lot. We have a Jack Russell Terrier that takes care of our mouse problem, but they were nibbling on the tops of our root crops. So we don't do a lot of those. It's funny, we farmed just a couple miles down the valley on that rented land, and we grew great root crops there. A lot of broccolis and, cabbages and cauliflowers, huge heads. And we got up here and the soil is just different. We did flood irrigation down there. Everything's on drip here. The soil's heavier. And so different things just worked. So we switched away from the CSA model to join a farmer-owned cooperative called Southwest Farm Fresh. And because of that, we're able to grow fewer things than we would have with a CSA, but really specialize in what we've gotten really good at, which is great because for whatever reason, the soils just don't like the brassicas here. And marketing, there's a handful of restaurants in this town that buy locally. Linda's was the best. She was just 100% all in. And I think there's a lot of greenwashing going on with that. I think there's some token buying of local products, and it's just written on the menu that it's local, and the farmers know. We're like, no, nobody's producing that right now. So I think it's important to ask your restaurants, can you be more specific? Can you tell me which products, are from a local farmer right now? And what is the name of the farmer? Because in a community, you can really hold each other accountable. And so if a restaurant is saying, this is from Adobe House Farm right now, we can say, and really make sure that they, first of all, know that that's important to you, that you're coming to their restaurant because they source locally. And then also make sure that the restaurant is being held accountable by saying that, by just, being honest about what they really have right now that you're eating from that farm. So I don't know if that answers your question, Woody, but I would say we need a lot more restaurants that are all in. There's a handful, and all the farmers know which ones they are, and we're all hounding them. So that's why extending your season and producing things a little bit outside of the season helps you stay, helps you sell everything more financially viable.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's kind of surprising as someone who has some familiarity with Durango, that the market is kind of, whatever that word is, it's just not racing towards you more. It's a sophisticated place. It has a college there. It has tourism. It's a pretty nifty little local economy thing. It seems from the outside. In other words, it's a bustling little area with some peripheral markets around it. So it's just interesting. Is it mostly cost? I mean, is mostly the obvious thing that the chefs just don't
I know restaurants are really struggling right now with COVID. So I know cost is a huge barrier. But I don't think they realize, I think they can get away with saying they're sourcing locally and not truly doing it. I think if they couldn't get away with that, it would be in their best interest, because I think the community is incredibly supportive. We counted numbers. Our farmers market's insane. It does really well. So I know people really want to source locally. I just think that A, the restaurants are struggling, but B, they can get away with saying they're doing more than they are.
And I would say, having lived in Durango now 22 years, I have seen a dramatic change. Like, the farmers market used to be, a handful of farmers. In Linley, I mean, how many farmers are there now? How many new farmers are there?
Yeah, there's about 40.
Yeah, so that's dramatic. There was a point, I think my third year here, where there was 6 or 7. So there has been a growth. There is a sustained change in consciousness as well. And I measure that by the supermarkets now will carry organic. And for a small town, we have 3 organic supermarkets, supposedly dedicated organic supermarkets. So the demand is there by far. I believe what Linley is saying is pretty close. I would say, just not to slag off my restaurant friends.
Yeah, but, there's something called shrink, or I think that's what it's called, where it's like, because produce is fresh, grocery stores assume that they're going to lose 20% of it or some percentage of it. And I think what they don't, so when we charge more for our cherry tomato pints than, an organic off the truck, the hydroponic tomatoes off the truck sell for 99 cents a pint. I don't know how they do that. I cannot compete with that. But when the grocery stores then assume a 20% loss of those 99-cent pints, that's not as big of a deal as a 20% loss on a $4 pint from me. But what they don't realize is that I picked them that morning and I'll deliver to them when they run out. So they're going to have 0 shrink. It will only be profit. So if they can, mark mine up $2 and get, $6 a pint, and they can mark that 99-cent one up $2, or sometimes maybe they go more. But my point is, like, they still make the same amount, but there's this formula that they assume is happening that just isn't happening with us. So we have to go in and really explain to them what we do, but it's not easy, right? They have one order with
Right,
UNFI.
that's the whole point, right?
Yeah, and I come in and part of the reason why this greenhouse is so great is because I can be very regular about my production for 6 months, and that's what a grocery store wants. But it's hard to do when you're a farmer, especially when you're getting started and you don't have the infrastructure, and everybody has a lot of products. So in Durango, and I imagine this happens all over the country, August, September, so much produce, farmers don't sell it all, and then there's nothing. And so there's this weird thing where people are saying, I can't get local produce, and farmers are saying, I can't sell it. And it's just about timing.
Mhm. Hey, listen, in the course of that last little bit, you said the magic word, hydroponic. So I think you should take some time, and because that's one of the things that Real Organic Project is really focused on from a regulatory standpoint. And I'm guessing a bunch of people on this call don't know much about that, may not be that familiar with it. So tell people what the issues are there and what you guys are doing about it.
Yeah, it relates to this discussion I was having with this farmer earlier, where it's like, it's hard to be against something. But there are really certain practices that are now being accepted under the National Organic Program as organic that have never been part of organic farming in the first place. And hydroponics, one of them. Really, organic farming is figuring out how to keep your soil fertile. And that's a very challenging thing if you're not applying fertilizers. And this is a very climate smart practice, just because the 80% of a carbon footprint of a farm is sourcing synthetic fertilizers. So this is something that organic farmers, beneficial for the climate, have been doing for decades. And we're not really getting credit for it at this point, because I don't think people realize how bad those fertilizers are for the environment. So probably, it used to be 5, so probably 7 years ago, farmers started noticing these incredibly cheap tomatoes. And it started with tomatoes because that's a really profitable thing to grow hydroponically. There's only a few crops where it works to grow hydroponic. It's greens, herbs, peppers, tomatoes, and cucumbers are really the big hydroponic crops. Those also happen to be the most profitable crops for a diversified vegetable grower. So often we're growing, peas and brassicas and all those other things because, we want to keep the diversity in our rotations and our income stream coming. But we're relying on those really profitable crops to kind of subsidize those not profitable crops that are good for the soil and allow for cover cropping and things like that. But when the price just started to drop on those, kind of high value crops, farmers noticed, and they were losing shelf space. They were getting dropped from grocery stores that they had markets with for decades. And so they went to the National Organic Program. They said, this is not an organic practice to be growing hydroponically. And then when the farmers got there, they realized that there were all these other problems with the National Organic Program right now, that we had a lot of grain fraud that was coming in on our ports. We had domestic grain fraud. We had some CAFO production, and it turns out with egg production, it's over 75% of the organic eggs on the market come from these large barns getting organic feed. But a lot of that feed was, again, connected to the fraudulent grain coming in off the port. So it was all connected. And farmers just really started getting active. Like, we're losing what we built, because the organic farmers built this movement in the first place. And they got organized, started coming together and standing up for what organic means. And it means that compost right down there in that soil. And, it means the cover crops. If you look at my farm from a satellite, any time of the year, it's green, unless there's snow on it. But, it's photosynthesizing even under the snow most of the time. So we are maximizing photosynthesis on this farm. And that is the best climate solution, is to get farmers to be doing that. So there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of debate over how vocal to be about it, because we didn't want people to run away from organic. It's the best we've got. And so we've decided to kind of come together as farmers and see if we can protect it. But staying quiet about the issues doesn't work. And that's how the eggs became so dominant. That kind of conversion of these conventional egg barns with the outdoor access that's required by organic, we're like these little porches off the side of the barn. So that's been going on for decades, and they've been trying to get that reform through the National Organic Program, and it hasn't worked. That's been going on for 20 years now. And you can see how that kind of quiet reform just allows the domination of the market of these kind of confinement, at least when it comes to eggs, of, you know, whatever that issue is that's slipping by, these loopholes become so dominant in the market that they're really too big to fail. And so now that, you know, we've even gotten some legislation through, it's been dropped because there's this whole other round of comment that happens after the National Organic Program writes a final rule, and then the industry kind of takes a look and says, well, what is this going to do? You know, what are the financial implications of these rules? And then they end up squashing it. So it can be really frustrating. The farmers know these issues so well because we're losing our farms over it. And you know, many of them have decided to get really vocal about it. And so we talk about these issues and try to raise awareness in the public, and guide people how to make good decisions in the grocery stores, because they're there. And if they're not there, figure out how to find that food and support the farmers that are using those practices.
And are you guys going to keep doing that the summit that you've been doing?
Yeah, we have a symposium every January. It used to be in person at Dartmouth because a lot of the farmers that started the movement are over in New England. But when COVID hit, it's all virtual, and you can, for free, you can watch all the recordings. They're really good. You'll learn a lot. So if you go to realorganicproject.org, you can see all the past symposiums on our website.
Yeah, it's really a very ambitious thing that they do. For anybody who hasn't been on there, there's lots of content that's very well curated. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in any of the story that Linley just told about the regulations and certification and all that, and more generally, just hearing from some leading soil scientists and leading farmers and whatnot. There's a lot of great stuff on there. So do check it out. Well, so I'm kind of curious. People have not been exactly flooding into the chat room with questions tonight. I have no idea why. You weren't like that compelling, Linley, so it can't be that.
I can talk. Shut me up. Someone else asked me a question.
So you can just raise your hand or just chime in if you want. I think we don't have such a huge crowd that we can't handle it. Donata, I see. Were you trying to raise your hand just now? Take yourself off mute.
Step one, step two.
Good to see you.
Good to see you guys. I had a couple of comments to add to the conversation. First, my compliments to you for looking at the market before you added more growing space. I had an unfortunate incident with a local farmer who has the most absolutely gorgeous produce, a gorgeous farm. And I brought 2 grandchildren out there at the beginning of COVID because their mother was about to kill them, and I had to do something, get them out of the house. So we did volunteer on her farm. And I was absolutely crushed to discover that she had so many resources, but not a lot of skill at managing a farm. And the day that tipped me over was the day that we had somebody who was taking care of the volunteers. And she said, well, I've got a job for you. She said, you can help me clean out the cooler. And so she gave the 3 of us about 10 tubs to go through to see what was fit for market. And I opened the tubs and I was greeted with a 2-inch layer of mold, and discovered that in her ability to grow, she didn't have the ability to plan. And so she had been consistently growing more than what there was a market for. And so out of those 8 tubs, we threw away all but perhaps 1 tub. And I ended up taking home about 40 pounds of carrots because I just couldn't throw them away. And there was no plan for passing them off to a food shelter, anything. It was just they were going to go back in the compost. So I had 40 pounds of disfigured carrots. Half the carrot was rotten, so I chopped it off, took the good part. And so it's really a complicated process, not just to know how to grow the food, but to know how to grow for the market you've got. And then the next comment has to do with marketing and advertising. I've just started working on a blog, Woody. And one of the things that I realized is how much money goes into marketing and advertising for the conventional products that we have. And unless we're able to put that kind of money into marketing the organic process, there's not going to be a huge growth spurt in the market, because they accomplished what they did by putting a lot of money into it.
Yeah, we always say, can you hear me? I
Yes.
switched over. Okay. We always say they're better at being us than we are. They have really good marketing that shows the family farm and the animals on pasture. And I don't know if you've ever seen Hippie Organics blueberries, but you know, they show the plants basically. You know, they never show the soil because everything's growing in pots on plastic, and there's plastic above. But they show a lot of close-ups of the blueberries and stuff, and it's like hippie marketing, like yeah, like all the kind of the early kind of founders of the organic movement were hippies. And so anyway, yes, it's so all of us got into this because we love growing things, not because we wanted to be marketing or, you know, running the books. And so we're often really bad at that stuff. And I think that's okay when you're getting started and you're bringing, like I said, we were harvesting fresh and just throwing it on a table, or harvesting, you know, the day before market or something like that. But you get to a point where if you're going to make it, you have to start thinking about it. And I don't think we share enough as growers, not only how to be good farmers, but also how to be good marketers. And so my hope is this t-shirt I'm wearing is Keep the Tractor Running. And that's a podcast that was Farmer to Farmer Exchange. And that's very much what the Real Organic Project is trying to do, is connect farmers to each other so that we can all be better, not only at growing, because I was a really, really bad grower when I started. I thought, you know, I worked on farms, and it's a whole different ballgame when you're doing it yourself. And like I said, every condition, every plot, the conditions are different. So you need to talk to farmers next door, not just, you know, in a broader connection. Some things are the same. Marketing certainly seems to be the same across the nation. And some things are transferable across the nation, but you need your local farmers that have been there forever in your community sharing with you. And it's hard because markets are tight. And so if I were to teach another farmer how to run this greenhouse, right, put up this greenhouse, and I would, because it's what has made our farm financially viable. And I want to see small farms financially viable. We would have to come up with a marketing plan together to figure out how we're going to make it work. Because like I said, I won't even put up another one right now. So I think the more we work together in farmer cooperatives for distribution and marketing, I think the better off we're going to be. And then if the eaters are willing to do that extra research and support those farmer efforts to market together, I think that's going to be where the real change is. We have to move beyond the farmers markets, in my opinion. They're flooded and they're seasonal.
I think, if I may step in really quickly as an ex, I used to have a restaurant. I had a restaurant for 14 years, which is what Linley's referring to. We need to relocalize the processing of food, especially in regions like Durango, where, you know, the season is what, June through October, if we're lucky, right, Linley? May through October. However, as Linley mentioned, is for 3 months, there's an overabundance of local production. When I was really paying attention, there was 30 to 40% waste in the farms. And now the community has organized. The local soup kitchen comes in at the end of the market and picks up whatever isn't sold, and it gets rechanneled We have the Good Food Collaborative that goes and harvests from people's orchards so that the bears don't get involved. And then they relocate hundreds of thousands of pounds that go either to making cider at a local brewery, which has made a massive change for the ecosystem for the bears. And we get cider, right? And the last loan that we did this year with slow money was for a small startup called Farm to Summit. And what they're doing is dehydrating. And they're buying seconds. So they're buying seconds all year round. And we were super happy when they applied because we want to have more local food entrepreneurs that are taking these goods from the farmers and making them into something else that we, the eaters, will then be more ready to consume, because some people are still not willing to peel, cut, slice, and cook, you know? So that's what I see as another growth area that I hope we can continue to explore and grow into locally, precisely to address this issue.
So listen, we're on like the issue of that has impelled me and all of us doing slow money for the last dozen years or so. Because if we're going to relocalize, and I'm going to ask Linley just to hold the space to comment on the word regenerate in a second, because, and I'll just say as a funny, I know it's a softball for you, Linley, but it's okay. It's an important softball. So you better hit it out of the park. I was at a regenerative conference not that long ago, and I found myself, I came because the organizer asked me to come, but I really felt like I was kind of not in the right place for various reasons. And so when it came my time to say something, I just looked at everyone and said, I think the reason I'm here is because every time the word regenerative gets used, I want you to think about the word relocalize. As soon as you hear the word regenerate, I want you to think of relocalize, because that disciplines that whole discussion in a certain way. And another thread, I'm going to pull these together in a second, another thread that comes up in a lot of slow money discussions is people say, well, everyone should just start growing vegetables in their backyard. And I say, yeah, sure, absolutely. More people should grow their own food. That'd be a good thing. But the solution, the thing that we need is, as communities, is to create community and regional food systems that do some of the stuff we just talked about, because it can only be done at that scale. So regional grain mills, other kinds of processing and distribution, the slaughterhouse thing, all of these issues can't really be solved by individual farms or individual backyard gardens. You know, we need all of that, and we need a more community approach that's going to allow us at an appropriate scale to rebuild community resilience and bioregional resilience. So to me, part of that puzzle, those of you who were on before we started today heard Kyle and I bantering about Aristotle's comment, the perfect is the enemy of the good. So I'm going to go to that now. All of these solutions are imperfect in different ways, right? Each one of them kind of peels a little bit off the onion here or there, but we need them all, because we're trying to move away from a system that has kind of commodified everything and globalized everything. And individual farms and individual consumers are not going to be able to internalize all those costs. And even individual communities, it has to be done at a more regional, at the level of a watershed or a valley or a region. Or so critical to that are groups of people coming together and putting some money together to help support that activity. And obviously, we're just at the very beginning, still after 12 years of some degree of success as this little movement called slow money. And I'm not being coy there to say some degree, some degree of success. We've done something, but not nearly enough. And I really believe that the 0% soil, this model of 0% loans that recirculate in perpetuity in the community, is a key part of the long-term solution, because there needs to be, just like you put up money, like you put up vegetables, crude metaphor, we need to put up some money too. We just need to put the money aside in a different way and dedicate it to something longer term. And it needs to involve hundreds of individuals and communities doing it in each community. We're barely started in that process. So anyway, I'm sorry for the little rant there, but the word relocalize, Linda, since you said it, I mean, I really think that's the way we should all be thinking about ourselves, as part of a virtuous relocalization. Carlo Petrini from Slow Food likes to talk about virtuous globalization. And so I've kind of lobbed back the phrase virtuous localization. Mary, hold your question for 1 second, because John Brown has had his hand up first. Then we'll go to Mary Hutton. Okay, John, unmute yourself, please. And say where you're from. And we're always bad about this. Please say where you're from.
Okay, yeah, I'm John Brown. I am in Helena Valley, Montana, just outside of Helena. And great story, Linley, and I'm really excited about what you're doing. And my question is, and Woody, your rant just helped me clarify that. What does it mean for a farmer to make it?
To come back and farm again another year, in my opinion.
Not quitting.
Yeah.
And in the context of what Woody is talking about, in relocalizing, that changes my concept of what making it means, because it's not just because you want to grow food. You want to grow food for a local community that's vibrant and alive and mimics your soil. So I mean, that's what I'm hearing when I hear relocalize, that making it for you is not just coming back to farm, it's coming, it's having a place, it's having a permanence of some kind, not just year to year, it seems to me. Anyway.
It's interesting. I got to travel the country quite a bit for the Real Organic Project because we inspect farms and to include them in the program. And in California, I was very spoiled. I was like, I have to own my land. I want to put perennials up. I want to put infrastructure up. I'm not going to farm unless I own my land. Well, in California, that's not a possibility for so many farmers. You have to just learn to accept that you're never going to afford to own your land. And what you want is a long-term lease. And so, depending on your location, I think those things can work out. But I think it sounds spoiled. But my dream was always to tend to a piece of land for a lifetime. And I think that's how you're going to get the best soil health practices, is when you assure the farmer. And then it's going to take a lifetime for me to tend to this soil right. So I think for the farmer to get that value back, they need to have long-term lifetime tenancy. That's a word. That's what I was searching for.
Mary, you've been very patient. Mary Hutton, unmute yourself and say where you're from.
I'm from near Cincinnati, Ohio. And I am part of a farmer's market. It's called Let Us Eat Well Farmer's Market. And you use the word relocalization, and that's what we've been working with for a long time, 12 years, relocalization. I grew up on a farm. We didn't call it eating local. We called it eating. It was eating. It wasn't eating local. It was eating what grew on our farm, mostly from our farm. Relocalization. So I recently sent an email and it mentioned you, Woody. I wanted to see you on a program that I watch on a regular basis. So I had this idea to email, it's called Financial Rebellion, and it's part of Children's Health Defense. And they have, it's once a week on Thursdays, and it's a video, or it's live, and they record it. And they're always talking on there, financial rebellion. How do we take care of ourselves financially, given what all is going on? And so they're constantly talking about local food, local food, local food. And I thought, okay, they have guest lecturers on there, or guest speakers on there sometimes. And I thought they need to get Woody Tash on there. So I did email them about a week or so ago. I don't know if what they'll do with it. But if you don't hear from them, I'm going to email them again, because I've never heard them say anything about slow money. And it's like, how can you talk about local food without bringing up slow money. So I thought, well, maybe they don't know about it. So there's one way to help them know about it. So
All
I
right, well,
did. Go ahead.
I'll tell you how things like that happen. How could CNN do an entire year of shows with Stanley Tucci about Italy without mentioning slow food? They did it, but they just mentioned it in like, they gave slow food like 2 minutes. They gave Carlo Petrini like 90 seconds in the second season. It was still wildly inadequate. But you know, the answer is it's an art, not a science, all these shows and whatnot. But thank you for that thought. I certainly appreciate it. Okay, you weren't finished, I guess. Go ahead. Keep going.
Well, so Children's Health Defense is not mainstream media for sure.
Oh, I didn't mean to imply that. I was just.
Oh, okay. Okay. So we used to have a slow money group in Cincinnati. It was called Local Loans for Local Foods.
I'm very well aware of that.
Yeah, and the people that were involved, heavily involved, were, you know, I don't know who it was that said volunteers, you know, we all get busy. And so we're not actively, we don't have an active group now. One of the people on the Financial Rebellion is in Cincinnati, but for the most part, she's the only one in Cincinnati. The others are here and there. So it's a very legitimate program, and we need to have slow money on there. We need to have Woody Tash on there. So anyway, just that's it.
All right. Well, thank you for that thought. And by the way, the issue you brought up about volunteers getting burnt out is not a small issue. So I think I should just say something about that. So another one of the thought processes behind the idea of loan groups making 0% loans with donated capital is, instead of having, let's say, a completely unstructured local informal network of people just finding farmers to lend money to, which is what a lot of the slow money was for the first decade. If you don't collect the dollars in some way and recirculate them, they will never grow. However, slowly, right? And if they grow slowly over time, that pool could decide to hire a staff person. If it's a nonprofit, small thing, the members can say, hey, you know what? It's time. We want to spend some of our money on a staff person because we believe the returns will be to the community will be great. If you're doing it as a for-profit investment club, you will never be able to afford that in a million years because the cost of the staffing will eat up any of the profits you would possibly make as a small investment club. So I know I just kind of dropped into the weeds a little bit, but I see a bunch of people nodding. So I think it was good. So my hope is that these 0% groups, as they get to a certain scale, it's going to take time, it's going to take patience, but 5 or 10 years into their arc of their lives, hopefully the lives will last for generations, they will be able to afford staffing, and people will start, and then we'll move from the era of pure volunteerism, which is beautiful, but not totally sustainable. I think anybody who's done this kind of thing knows that no matter how beautiful it is, it's not sustainable. We need to have some structure there that holds the energy over time, and that probably involves staffing at some point. So thank you for raising all those points. There are a few things in the chat room. Del Myers, I don't know if you're still on, but he put it to everybody. He says, do 0% loans make sense in a world with 3% inflation? So I'm laughing because to me, that is beyond a softball. That is like a watermelon coming towards me, and I have like a tree trunk that I want to swing at that watermelon and smash it. Del, I'm glad you're laughing. So yeah, this is about stopping thinking like that and thinking about like, what difference does 3% make or 5% if we don't have any food, we don't have any water. A dear friend, Marco Evangelisti, who was the featured guest at one of these sessions about 6 weeks ago. And Marco is a kind of a fugitive from professional finance, beautiful guy. He's just agreed to become a Beetcoin advisor, by the way. And when he gives a talk, and I don't remember, I think he probably had this cartoon in his Beetcoin dialogue. You guys can remind me, but he often uses a cartoon that shows a father standing over like a little campfire, and his son is at the campfire, and the father's taking a gas mask off, and it's kind of a very, very arid, like a desert scene. And he goes, yes, son, it's true. For one brief moment, we all made lots of money in the stock market or something. So, you know, this is you know, I certainly believe this. You have to decide how urgent you think the situation is. I mean, if you believe that late stage capitalism is taking us off a cliff, and it's not just capitalism, it's more like industrialization and globalization, because the same thing happens in socialist countries. And this whole idea of just unlimited growth, that we just have to keep growing, and that the only way to grow is to fuel corporate engines to fuel the growth, you know, that's taking us off a cliff. That comment about returns and inflation and whatever, that's all tied. Those are metrics that are inside the paradigm of industrial economics. And somehow we have to create some space for us all to step outside that and reconnect at the local level. Once you do that, the idea of a 0% loan, so, you know, I guess the quip would be, yeah, I'll take the 0% loan and food. You can have the 3% return if that's what you prefer. Now, it's not really, we don't have to choose all or nothing. So that's the other part of the answer. Let's see. Peggy Gould just put something in there. Peggy, do you want to say it, or do you want me to read it? You were just there. There you go.
I mean, it's a, you know, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I'm thinking about, you know, place, identifying, you know, a region in which there are multiple constituents who are eaters, and certainly in every region, there are eaters who are targeted for economic disadvantage and therefore much poorer quality of food and much poorer health, etc. So, you know, is it conceivable that there could be some kind of a structure like this comes from Linley, listening to you talking about owning land and the sort of notion of what owning land is, and like making a lifetime commitment to that. And is it conceivable or advisable to think of like creating a municipal kind of ownership of land in which there might be people who make a lifelong commitment to tend that land, and also then is permeable to additional constituent groups to come and participate, you know, sort of like edible schoolyard, you know, people of all ages, people from multiple communities to buy in to the food system?
Well,
I would so be down with that.
Question, Lily. Yeah, go ahead. And the answer
I would have hopped on board in a second to a situation where I could have a lifetime spot on a place that I didn't own. And then we can market together. We can do all kinds of things together. And that needs to happen close to towns. And this is area under extremely high development. And our water out west should not be turned into these little ponds and you know, write-offs for a horse or two, you know, ag write-offs. It's really problematic. We need real people who are really farming the land, communally, absolutely. And this land is going for $500,000 an acre here in Durango. I'm sure it's worse other places. So this is highly developed land that needs to go into a conservancy for farmers.
So Peggy, I see that question as, I mean, Linley just kind of did it, but well, you both did. It loops back to this level of talking, which is bigger than an individual farmer, right? It comes back to this, there's a level of action that has to happen. So, and we can just call it, you know, municipal is fine, bioregional is another one. You started off with the word place, I think, in your comments, which was great, because to me, that is such it's laden with so many nuances, because people live in a place and they have to relate to each other in the place. And it doesn't really, yes, it might matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a capitalist or a socialist, but you live in the place and you have to take care of one another in the place where you live. And that's a certain kind of discipline that cuts across ideologies ultimately, right? If we're going to leave places at least as good or better than we found them, we have to figure out how to do that. So all of these schemes, you know, community gardens, community land ownership schemes, cooperatives, community, you know, regional processing, all of these different things are shots at the target of sort of getting from the individual transaction or the individual isolated thing to a more coordinated approach that creates value across the community, which is really hard. I mean, it's hard to just go from where we are to that. And I want to reinforce that little things like this that we're doing are all part of this process. We just got to stick with it. And we just got to stick with it. And every time you take a little money and take it from wherever you are going to put it and put it into a community thing like this where it recirculates is significant beyond the dollars. It's just significant as an act. So, so I'm cognizant of the time that it's 8:03. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken? Donata, I see you have your hand up again. Before I call on you, let's just see if anybody hasn't spoken. Did I miss anything? If not, Donata, go ahead. And Donata, say where you're from too. Everyone has to say where they're from.
Atlanta.
Mhm.
There we go.
Good. Thank you.
Woody, I wanted to ask you directly, and maybe you could figure out a way to get a reading. Are you familiar with Wholesome Wave?
I am.
I'm wondering if you can help the rest of your, the rest of the people on the call to just give them a 2-sentence overview, because maybe there's a way in some communities, maybe it is in Durango, maybe it's not, or maybe communities can find a way to bring it to their community.
Well, what I'm familiar with Wholesome Wave is their work with farmers market and SNAP benefits and expanding access to fresh local food for people who normally otherwise might not be able to afford it. So that's
Yep.
what you're referring to. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so Wholesome Wave, you should check it out. It's a very, very active NGO. They do a lot of lobbying work and work in Washington and whatnot with creating whatever you want to call it, subsidies or other access points to farmers market food for populations that might not otherwise be shopping there. I don't know if you want to say more than that. Donata.
just that it's 2 to 1. So they collect money. And then when you go to a farmer's market that participates, for $10 that is on your credit card from SNAP, you are given $20 in tokens at the market to buy. So it's another way of expanding a market in case a community doesn't have that resource.
So Donata, 2 things. One is related to this, and one I just realized you had another comment in the chat room about marketing, and I want to say something about that. So here's another idea. Like if we're just talking amongst friends here, we're brainstorming, like how do we get from the transaction commodity driven thing of every man for himself, buy low, sell high, shelf space, all that stuff, to this more community vision? Well, if you do it the way Slow Money is doing it at the moment, we are vulnerable to the criticism that we have these parochial, mostly white community groups acting in a few isolated places. How's that ever going to add up to systemic change, right? And I'm only saying that now, Donata, because you bring up a comment about sort of less economically disadvantaged populations getting to participate in this. So here's a vague idea. I don't know how we could ever do it. Wouldn't it be nice if, let's say, I don't know if anybody's on this call from Soil Boulder. I think Amy Devine is still on here. At least I see her listed in the participants. What if a group like Soil Boulder, which is in an affluent community, had like a sister group in some other community? Now, I don't know exactly how we would do that. I can say that as one of the founders of Soil Boulder, even though I don't live there anymore. I'm allowed to say provocative things and they can either ignore me or not, especially since I don't live there anymore. But I'm not saying it at Boulder per se. I'm just saying it at all of us. In other words, those of us who are able to start doing some different things need to be thinking about not just doing it with the people in our immediate community, in our immediate physical communities, but thinking about our community as a broader term than that, right? And how would we connect with people in other places? And I am going to be taking some shots at this target over time, just so you hear that. I'm not sure how that's going to unfold. Now, I want to connect this to the comment that Donata put in the chat room about marketing. So guess what Beetcoin is an effort to do? It's an effort to market. It's an effort to brand something in a way that will quickly gain traction with lots of people. Now, whether we can succeed at that, that's another thing. But and just so you hear, since I said that, I have a call tomorrow with the marketing firm that we've retained to help us develop a go-to-market strategy for Beetcoin. We haven't done any marketing for Beetcoin yet. It's just sitting there. And these dialogues are meant to be just a gentle way of kind of keeping the idea alive in the public domain. But Beetcoin is a brand. Beetcoin is our attempt to create a brand that is provocative, information laden, and engaging, that will attract attention and people and ultimately dollars, so that we can do, I want to tie it back to how this session started. Linda said, I/Slow Money gave a $5,000 matching grant to Durango. Well, that is true. I wish it could have been 50,000, you know, but it got things going. Maybe 50,000 would have been too much also, who knows? I mean, things got going in the way they wanted to get going in Durango, and it was beautiful. And I'm hoping that Beetcoin will be a source of those kind of matching grants for groups all over the country. But we have to prove that our marketing, coming back to this, that we're able to kind of up our game in a certain way. I want to say another weird countervailing thing about marketing that occurred to me during that earlier conversation also. The beautiful thing about local interactions is you don't need the same kind of market. You don't need the same level of that kind of marketing. That marketing is super expensive because you're going on the airwaves and you're trying to fight in the noise of the marketplace, right? If Linley is going down and haranguing her friendly chef to buy her produce when she has it, that's a different kind of, right? That's a different, there's different things that happen when you're interacting face to face. That's all, when you're not buying airwaves and you're not trying to capture people's attention in the airwaves. I know I just said two different things, but I just wanted to respond to those few points. Now, who else hasn't said anything? Who wants to contribute? Anybody? All right, because it's 8:09, as is the custom, we're going to stop recording in a second. Kyle, don't stop the recording yet. I want to say one other thing, and that is, those of you who saw the piece that I circulated about 3 weeks ago, or a month ago now, called A Call to Farms, I just wanted to report that it is likely, not definite, but likely, that we are going to host a meeting in September called A Call to Farms that will attempt to be a larger meeting using a combination of Zoom and local meetings. And I just wanted you to hear that today. Don't ask about it because we're not definite yet. But it's gotten a lot of response, and it's a little bit of an effort to kind of link the food movement and the non-existent peace movement. Is there a peace movement anywhere that I don't know about? There is a peace movement? Peggy, you're nodding yes. Do tell me, because I want to know about it so I can participate in it. All right.
The problem with the peace movement is that we don't actually have a free press, and so there's no coverage of it. But the peace movement is greater right now across the entire world than it's ever been in human history.
Okay, so I do want to talk.
No coverage.
Okay, so actually I do want to talk to you about it because I haven't been like actively involved. I've just been shooting some ideas out there. So with that, we should all pray for peace because that's rather important at this moment. Thank you all for coming. I do view what we're doing as our own small contribution to healing and creating peace and de-escalating and all those things which are important. So thank you all for coming on tonight. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks, those of you who can make it. Remember that all the previous sessions are curated on the Beetcoin site, as will this one be in a few days after we gussy it up a little and get it on there. And thank you all so much. Special thanks to Linley and Linda and all the folks in Durango, and thanks to you all for coming on.